Hello and welcome to this tutorial on colour correction in Premiere Pro. In the last tutorial you learnt about blend modes, how we could use black video and colour mattes to overlay our footage in a sequence, or you could do it on individual footage items, how you then can select the layer, the black video in this case, that you can then open up the opacity tab and choose one of these many blend modes, which is a far better way of blending the pixels of one layer with another than just using opacity below. So rather than just making one layer transparent so you can see more of the other ones below it, these different modes use different ways of blending those pixels to get some really nice results. And then we learnt that once you'd chosen your blend mode, soft light in this case, you could then change the amount of the effect simply by moving the hot text next to opacity. As you can see, we've got it down here at 23%. If I took it all the way back up to 100, you'd see that that has a very, very big darkening effect on the overall footage. Actually, you might think that looks great. You can dial up and down simply by changing this slider to get the desired results. Okay, so now that you've learnt about blend modes, I want to show you one other technique which is often used to make video look more like film. And I'm going to open up another sequence I've created here, which is with a piece of footage from Adobe of a man running and jumping and avoiding all kinds of different explosions. And we're going to make it look slightly better by using blend modes and this Filmic blend technique. Now, I've got one piece of footage here. Later on I'm going to show you can do this with a whole sequence. What we need to do is bring in a duplicate version of that footage. So I've got it in my project panel here. Click, drag and drop it on top. And then the first thing we want to add to it is actually an effect. We want to add a fast blur. So in our effects tab here we can start typing fast. And then we'll get fast blur, and we can grab and drop that on top of the layer. And there we have fast blur applied. We can open that up, and then we need to choose a blur amount. Now you don't need to choose much, particularly with some of the higher quality cameras we have these days. The idea, as far as I can tell, is to try and blur the lines. So as you know, video is made of a whole number of lines. In this case it's 1080 lines, but there are gaps between those lines. You can't see them when you're at full resolution. The human eye doesn't notice them. Well, you don't think the human eye notices them, but actually there is a difference between film and video, and what we want to do is emulate film, make it look a little bit more film-like. So if we apply a fast blur, we're blurring the edges of those lines. Now you don't usually need to do much. Just for this example I'm just going to do 1 pixel. And you can decide that you're only going to do it vertically, but I'm going to do horizontally and vertically. And that's applied. You can't really see much of a difference, but it's going to show in the overall result. So now we can choose the blend mode. So again we go up to opacity. I'm going to turn off the stopwatch again simply because I don't want to animate this effect over the whole clip. However, if you want to animate the amount of opacity over a whole clip or over a whole sequence, you leave the stopwatch on, you go in, you can change the amount of opacity for different clips. It's another option. Anyway, I'm going to turn it off because I don't want to animate it. And I'm going to choose a blend mode. Now, there are two that I would play with in this particular instance. The two that I would look at probably are the multiply and overlay. Now have a look at them both. Let's start with overlay. That's overlay. It's given me quite an interesting look. And again we pull back the opacity to dial back the effect. So we can pull it back to say 55%. That looks pretty good. Now let's see what multiply looks like. So again select the blend modes and go to multiply. And you get a slightly darker look. Now for me, of those two, I think probably overlay is the better. Going back up to 55% or so. I think multiply is just making it look a little bit too muddy or dark for me. So again I'm going to go back from multiply back to overlay. You could try another one in this category, such as soft light or hard light. Play with these blend modes until you can see what they do, and then apply them and use the opacity slider to get the look that you're after. But already we've made a significant difference. So if we just turn this layer on and off, this is before, it kind of looks flat now. When you turn it back on, we've got quite a lot of depth to it. But what we want to do for the final part of this technique is see if we can bring out the highlights a little bit. And to do that, you repeat the process. So you bring in the original footage and drop it over the top, and then you apply the fast blur to it, and then select the footage, open up fast blur, and again I'm just going to choose 1 pixel. Sometimes you can get away with half a pixel, but with some of the other footage you might find you want 2. Again, play with fast blur and see which effect is best. Then I'm going to open up opacity, And then I'm going to choose now one of the lighten modes, and I'm probably going to go for screen rather than lighten because screen is a little bit subtler, but again, play with them. Let's start with screen. Now that makes the whole thing very bright, and again we can dial it back so that we can get a slightly better look. Let's take it back to again about 55%, see what it looks like. Now let's turn those layers off. There's the original image, and that's with multiply, and that's with screen. And let's change the blend mode from screen to lighten, so from screen to lighten, and then I might need to actually increase the opacity a bit to get a bit more effect in there. See what it looks like. I think for what we're trying to do, I think screen is going to look a lot better. So again, I'm going to go from lighten back to screen. I'm going to move screen back down to about 55%. And now we have created quite a significant different look to how we started. So this is how we started. Quite flat, and then if we add the screen in this time, so we've lightened it this way to make the whole thing stand out a little bit more, but then we added the multiply in first, which really sort of darkened and made the shot look a lot deeper. So that's the Filmic blend technique. But Filmic blend doesn't just have to apply to clips, you can do it to sequences. So here we have a sequence that we did earlier. This is the one that we did in the previous tutorial, where we've got a series of colour mattes. So we've got the black matte which darkened it down a bit, we've got a blue matte which added the blue into the sky, and a white matte that just brought out some of the highlights. I'm actually going to delete those, and I've got a complete sequence which is my edited sequence. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that sequence, the whole of it, and I'm going to move it into another sequence, which I've done here. There is the same sequence. If I get to about the same place, we'll probably find those kids playing somewhere around here. There we are, there are the kids, and again you can see it looks fairly flat. But what you can do is you can actually perform the Filmic blend technique with whole sequences. So if we open up the sequences and find the original one, which was edited, and pull it and drop it on top, and let's do the same thing. So fast blur, pull fast blur on there, and then let's add 1 pixel of fast blur. Oh, one thing I forgot to do on the previous one, which is quite important, is you actually need to repeat edge pixels. If you don't repeat edge pixels, let me just pull out the blur to show you what happens. If you pull out blur and actually turn off the bottom layer so you can actually see this one on its own, you'll see what's happened is I've pulled the actual image in. So it's important, if I now click repeat edge pixels, you can see that it looks after the edge and it doesn't pull it in anymore. So do click repeat edge pixels. I should have done that on the previous one. And take this back down to 1 and turn on the bottom layer so we can see the whole thing. Right. So that's with 1 pixel, and as I say, you should always click repeat edge pixels to avoid any problems with opacity around the edges. Right, now we've got that on there, we know we need to choose a blend mode, so let's go to opacity tab, go to our blend modes. Again, I'm not going to do any animation with it, and we'll go down to, let's do overlay again. Alright, that's given us quite a stark look. Now let's pull that right back down. This time let's try 44%, maybe even slightly less than that on this one. Let's try it down to 28%. Let's do a before and after. So before, after, before, after. You could possibly even go a little bit higher on that. Just put it up to say 35%, 34%. So before, after. We've given it a richness and a depth. And then the next thing we need to do is bring in another copy of the sequence, pull that and drop it on. Add fast blur again. Remember to repeat edge pixels, which I forgot last time, and we'll give it 1 pixel again. And now we need to choose a blend mode, and we'll choose a lightning blend mode. Again, I'm not going to animate it, although on a sequence you might want to animate it. As you get to different bits and pieces, you might want to turn the effects up and down. But for this example, I'm not going to animate it. I'm going to go down to, let's try screen again, which has brightened it up hugely, and we can pull it right down to say 20%. And now let's do a before and after. So before, after. Now with some footage it's going to look better than it does with others. It's a technique to try now that you know that you have blend modes, and once you've applied it you might find it makes a significant difference to your footage, as I think this particular example shows better than perhaps the nested sequence. It depends how the footage was filmed, it depends what the footage looks like, it depends how well it's exposed. Quite a few different bits and pieces, but it's a technique that's worth trying to make your footage look more like film and less like video. Well, I hope you found this technique useful, and I hope you'll use it in your productions to make your video look more like film. Certainly it can have a huge impact on how things look and make a significant difference, and turn something that looks okay into something that looks wonderful. My name's Andrew Davis, and thank you for watching.